Two men walk into the same neighborhood bank on a Tuesday morning. The first one arrives in a leased European SUV. Designer watch. He talks loudly on his phone about a deal while he waits. Everyone in the branch notices him. If you asked the people in line to point at the wealthy one, every finger goes to him. The second one arrives on foot. 12-year-old jacket. He says good morning to the teller by name, asks one quiet question about a transfer, and leaves in 4 minutes. Nobody notices him at all. The first man has a negative net worth. The lease, the watch, the lifestyle, financed, all of it. The second man owns the building the bank is in. This is not a story about one bank. It is the single most consistent finding in decades of research on American millionaires. Real wealth is almost invisible. The people who have it tend not to display it, and the people who display it very often do not have it. Which means the signals you have been taught to read, the car, the watch, the house, the vacation photos, are not just useless for spotting wealth. They are actively misleading. They point, more often than not, in exactly the wrong direction. In this video, I am going to give you the 13 signs that actually reveal quiet wealth, not the cliches. The behavioral signals, the small, almost invisible things that show up over and over in people who have built real money. Some of them will surprise you. At least one of them will make you uncomfortable. And here is the real reason to stay until the end. This video is not actually about spotting wealthy people. It is a checklist. Count how many of the 13 describe you, because every single one of them is a behavior you can adopt. And together, they are much of the reason quiet wealth exists in the first place. One principle before the list, because it explains everything on it. Visible spending and net worth compete for the same dollars. Every dollar that performs wealth cannot simultaneously build it. So, the people optimizing for looking rich and the people optimizing for being rich are, mathematically, running in opposite directions. And after 20 or 30 years, the gap between them is enormous. That is why the signs of real wealth are quiet. Not because wealthy people are hiding, because the behaviors that built the wealth are, by their nature, things that do not show. Sign 1. Their car is older than their portfolio statements. The most repeated finding in millionaire research. The majority of American millionaires drive cars that are several years old, bought used or kept long past the upgrade cycle. We did an entire video on what replacing working things actually costs. The secretly wealthy are the people who never needed that video. A reliable 9-year-old sedan in the driveway of a paid-off house is statistically a stronger wealth signal than a new luxury SUV in front of a mortgaged one. Sign 2. They ask the price of small things and ignore the price of big distractions. Watch a quietly wealthy person at a restaurant versus at a meeting with their accountant. At dinner, they will genuinely check the price of the wine. At the meeting, they will approve a 5-figure tax strategy in 10 minutes. They are not cheap. They are calibrated. Attention goes where the stakes are. People performing wealth do the opposite. Casual about the big numbers. Theatrical about ignoring the small ones. Sign 3. You cannot tell what they do from what they wear. The lawyer dresses like a teacher. The business owner dresses like a contractor. There is no costume, because there is no audience. Clothing as a wealth signal stopped working decades ago precisely because it is the cheapest signal to fake, and the quietly wealthy were the first to stop paying for it. Sign 4. They talk about time the way other people talk about money. Listen for it. That is not worth a Saturday. I would rather pay and have my evening back. That meeting could have been an email. The quietly wealthy treat ours as the scarce currency. Because once money is no longer scarce, time is the only thing left that is. Someone constantly busy, constantly reachable, constantly performing effort is usually still trading time for money. Someone protective of their calendar has usually stopped. Sign 5. Their phone is old and their boots are good. This is the cost-per-use instinct, and it shows up everywhere once you look. They keep the 4-year-old phone because the new one does nothing different. They spend real money on a mattress, work boots, a winter coat, things used every single day for years. Cheap on what depreciates and impresses. Expensive on what lasts and serves. It is the exact inverse of how performed wealth spends. Sign 6. They never say the number. The quietly wealthy almost never volunteer what anything cost, what they earn, or what they are worth. Not from secrecy, from the absence of the need. Stating numbers is a status move, and status moves are for people still climbing. We made a whole video on why retirees should tell no one. The secretly wealthy figured that out at 30. That is 6. The next 7 include the uncomfortable one, and the one that predicts wealth better than income ever has. Subscribe if this is landing, because we go this deep every single week. Quick note before we continue. I am not a financial advisor, and everything on this channel comes from my own research and analysis, not professional credentials. The patterns in this video come from published research on millionaire behavior and are generalizations. Plenty of wealthy people break every one of these rules. Before making any financial decisions, please consult a qualified financial advisor who knows your complete picture. Now, let's continue. Sign 7. Their reaction to a market crash is boredom. When markets fall 30%, the loudest panic comes from people with the least invested, and from people whose lifestyle depends on next month's income. The quietly wealthy have lived through several crashes, sold into none of them, and know from experience that the recovery is where their net worth came from. If someone shrugs at a red October, they have usually seen this movie before and own the theater. Sign 8. They know their numbers cold. Ask a quietly wealthy person their monthly spending, and they will tell you within a few $100s. Ask their net worth, and they know it to the nearest 10,000. Not because they obsess, because they ran the math once, properly, and updated occasionally. Meanwhile, the man with the leased SUV does not know his credit card balance. Vagueness about your own numbers is one of the most reliable signs the numbers are bad. Sign 9. Their generosity is specific and silent. They pay off a niece's student loan and ask her not to mention it. They fund the scholarship that does not carry their name. Public generosity is a performance with a return. Private generosity is just generosity, and it requires actually having the money. The size of the gesture nobody saw is one of the strongest wealth signals that exists, precisely because it cannot be faked for an audience that is not there. Sign 10. They are the calmest person in every money conversation. Financial stress is loud. It interrupts. It justifies. It brings up money unprompted because money is the background noise of its entire life. Real financial security is quiet in the literal sense. Money simply stops being an interesting topic. If someone never steers conversation toward what things cost, what they make, or what they just bought, it is usually because the subject is settled. Sign 11. The uncomfortable one, they say no to people they love. Here is the sign nobody puts on these lists. The quietly wealthy have all, at some point, declined to fund an adult child's lifestyle, a sibling's third business idea, a friend's sure thing. Not because they are cold. We covered the generosity budget in the video about what wealthy retirees stopped buying, but because they understand that a fortune can survive any market crash and almost never survives becoming the family bank. The inability to say no is one of the most common ways large net worths quietly disappear. The discipline to say it, kindly, with a defined limit, is how they persist. Sign 12. Boring portfolio, boring story. Ask what they invest in, and the answer is almost disappointing. Index funds, a rental property, their own business, held for decades. No crypto saga, no options play, no story that would entertain a dinner table. The portfolios that build quiet wealth are boring by design, because excitement in investing is just risk-wearing cologne. If someone's investment stories are thrilling, check back in 10 years. Sign 13. They have a number that means enough, and they can say it. This is the sign that holds up all the others. Ask a quietly wealthy person what enough looks like, and they answer without hesitating. A number, a life, a sentence. We made an entire video on defining enough, and this is where it shows up in the wild. The performer with the leased SUV has no number. His target is always more, which is why every dollar gets spent signaling progress toward a finish line that does not exist. The man who owns the building knew his number 20 years ago. Everything after it became quiet. Now, go back through the list and notice what just happened. Not one of the 13 signs requires a high income. Old car, calibrated attention, no costume, time over money, cost per use, no numbers volunteered, calm in crashes, knowing your figures, silent generosity, settled money conversations, the ability to say no, a boring portfolio, a defined enough. Every single one is a behavior, which means this was never a video about identifying wealthy strangers at the bank. It is a mirror. The signs of secret wealth are the causes of it, and every one of them is available to you at any income starting this week. The man with the leased SUV is not failing because he earns too little. He out-earns the man who owns the building. He is failing because every one of his behaviors points outward, toward the audience. And wealth is built by the behaviors that point inward, where nobody is watching and nobody applauds. 13 signs, 0 of them visible from the parking lot. All of them visible in your own bank statements, if you look. So here is the exercise this week. Go through the 13 and score yourself honestly. 1 point each. Most people land between 4 and 6. Then pick the one sign that stung the most when you heard it. Not the easiest one. The one that stung. That sting is information. It is the gap between the wealth you display and the wealth you are building, located precisely. The man who owns the building was not born with 13 points. He collected them one at a time, over decades, in a 12-year-old jacket nobody ever complimented. Wealth that needs an audience is a performance with operating costs. Wealth that needs nothing is just freedom, compounding quietly. Tell me in the comments, which of the 13 do you already have, and which one stung? I want to see the honest scores. I read every single comment. Subscribe. Because next week, we are mapping your life at every level of compound interest, from the first $100 a month to the day the interest out-earns your salary, year by year. with the real numbers. After today's mirror, that video is the map.